I love the way the First Gen Lounge makes me feel.
Because it creates a space where I belong, where we're able to create community.
The fact that it's a community.
It's a safe place.
It also gives me a place to understand different perspectives.
The stories of these individuals prescribe transformational perspective.
I receive encouragement, enlightenment, empowerment.
And also serve as a catalyst to just keep going.
Where we're able to be our true selves.
I'm allowed to be an unapologetic first gen.
And above all else, tell our story.
And every episode is unique.
I love it.
I'm your host, Dr. Eve, and I'd like to welcome you to the First Gen Lounge.
So it's Thursday. I get excited about Thursday. Everybody on the podcast knows, and hopefully y'all don't get sick of me saying that because, Thursday is a day that we are here for you. So I am here today with somebody who is FLI. Y'all will see why later. But I have Cesar Margarito. Did I say it right? Did I do it right this time?
Perfect.
I was working on it. Cesar, I really do. I love it though. And I love the cultural tongue that you have to put behind, rolling for your R's and when you say names that are, like yours. Not trying to be funny with that, but this is really cool. But Cesar, my new friend who was out in California, we're talking about the weather again. We talk a lot about the weather on the show, but weather can tell you a lot about a place and it helps shape experiences. But I don't want to talk too long. I want to let Cesar tell you who he is and about all of the amazing, amazing things that he has been doing. So Cesar, take it away. How are you, friend?
Well, good morning. I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's definitely a pleasure to be here and share a little bit about my story, which, again, listening to your podcast, I think I got some big shoes to fill. I've had some amazing people in the past. So hopefully I can kind of live up to that trend. So thank you so much for having me. But I'm good. I'm good. As you say, I'm in California, in Southern California to be exact. And fortunately, haven't been affected too much by the earthquakes. They've been a little bit further away from where I'm at. My family and friends in the area, fortunately have been okay. It's definitely a wake-up call for sure to be ready and prepare. And actually, a friend of mine who I'm actually visiting this week, he's got his earthquake kits ready right by his door. So it's a good reminder for me to get mine started. So.
Yeah, you might want to do that, friend. And, and I was saying a few minutes ago, I'm really fascinated by weather because you can't control weather.
Correct.
There are so many things that we can't control in life, but we can't control weather. And weather often causes you to have to adapt, be it that it's cold or that it's hot. You have to, an earthquake is happening, a tsunami, a hurricane. These things change our lives and it could happen within a blink of an eye. We had some pretty tough weather come through North Carolina last night. And I was like, wait a minute. I got a little scared for a moment. I was like, what is going on? But it passed, thankfully. So yeah, but fun that you're in Southern California. How long have you been there?
I've been down here. It'll be 3 years this October. So it's gone by fast. I actually grew up north, Central California, Monterey County to be exact, in a little tiny town called Chular, California. Most people have never heard of it. So any Chularians listen to this, shout out to you. But it's a very small agricultural town in the southern part of Monterey County, which most people are familiar with Monterey. They think Cannery Row, Fisherman's Wharf, all that stuff. John Steinbeck, wrote a lot about that area. So a lot of people have that idea in mind. And I grew up more in the agricultural side, away from the tourists. But I was originally born and raised in Mexico, a small town in central Mexico, and moved to the U.S. when I was about 10 years old. And that's the area that I grew up in before going off to college and started my college career.
Interesting. So just curious, being that you were born and raised until 10 in Mexico and you came here, how was that transition for you?
Well, definitely, at that age, going into middle school, at the end of 5th grade, and then my school was very unique in that it had 1st through 8th grade in the same facility. All right. So small classrooms. But at that age, kids can be a little bit cruel coming into a new country, for sure, a new educational system, which was the reason why our parents moved me and my 3 siblings. I'm the third of 4 children. Learning the language was, certainly the biggest obstacle. But oddly enough, I think I was able to pick it up relatively quickly. So I came in towards the end of 5th grade. And by the time 6th grade rolled around, I wouldn't say I was fluent, but I understood, things very well. And growing up a very timid kid, it was the speaking aspect that I was very hesitant about through actually most of my career, even though I was fluent. whenever I was put in any kind of formal setting to speak, especially, in front of the classroom, even though I knew everybody in the room, I was always timid because I was very self-conscious about, the accent that I may have and, how I kind of presented myself. So that was probably the biggest challenge, to be able to acclimate to new city, new people, certainly the language as well. And, the occasional bully here and there. And it happens, but fortunately, it was nothing that was major. I was able to outgrow and adjust, okay over time.
So you mentioned, the idea of acclimating and adjusting to being here. Was college something that was always on the brain? Because I think sometimes college is one of the American dream kind of things, like you should aspire for education. But I know college is big everywhere, but just here we really, really have this thing about go to college. Everybody should go to college. What was that like for you?
It was definitely that. I mean, that's definitely the reason why. So my parents were migrant field workers. So they, growing up, we went back and forth. So technically, I was born in Mexico, but 2 weeks after I was born, we moved to the States again. And I was here for my first 5 years of my life.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then we went back to Mexico when I was 5. And I was there from 5 to 10, right? And then moved back. And all the while, especially my dad and sometimes my brother during the summers, they would go back and forth to work, right? But the reason my parents made a decision to move permanently to the U.S. was because they saw education as one of the primary and best ways for us to have a better life than they did. So that was the driving force. It was always, there wasn't a doubt that I was going to go off to college, but it was a very general idea. Obviously my parents being farm workers, field workers, they knew about college and they knew that was it, but they didn't speak the language. They didn't know the process, and obviously they couldn't help us navigate the system. So aside from, okay, you're going to go to college, that was really it. Even the homework that we had while I was in, middle school, high school, there was only limited assistance that they could provide, if any, and after a certain point, there wasn't much. But it was that driving force, and I'm definitely, proud to say that, all 4 of us they go on to college. 3 of us are in education. My older brother, he's the oddball. He went to engineering, so he went a very different route. But right. He's very, very successful in his field as well as my other sisters. They're still in education. They both went the elementary teacher route, so that's kind of what they've been doing since graduation. But we're all products of California's public institutions. My sisters graduated from UC Santa Cruz, UC Davis. Both my brother and I graduated from another state school, California State University, or Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. So we were at the same school, but we were not there at the same time just because of the age gap. But again, the driving force was my parents and saying, okay, you're going to college, you're going to go through. And even while in college, they didn't really know what it was like. So it's kind of hard for them to really hold us accountable. And I'm speaking for myself because, being first gen, you're figuring out things for yourself for the first time.
All right.
And fortunately for me, I've been fortunate to have gone to community college first to kind of do a little bit of growing up and maturing. And selfishly, I wanted to play soccer. So I was able to be part of the soccer team at that institution after the years that I was there. So it kind of helped me get a little bit more focused before transferring on to the university that I did. But even then, it was another transition that I go through because kind of like when I came here at 10 years old, I found myself in a different environment with people I didn't know. So the area that I grew up in, Monterey County, the high school that I went to and the community college that I went to was very homogeneous in the sense that the majority of the student population and the population in the area was primarily Latino, primarily Mexican, which is a big influence. And then when I went off to university at San Luis Obispo, it was primarily white. And being a history major and a psychology major, most of my classes, I was the only or one of a few persons of color in those classrooms, as well as the institution. Over 2/3 of the student population are white. So definitely being a student of color, you feel that, right? So you try to gravitate towards that sense of community that you can find. And fortunately, it took me a while, but I was fortunate enough to eventually find one. And to this day, they're some of my closest friends that I still keep in touch with, but still making that transition and going through that. Again, going back to my parents, there wasn't a whole lot they can do. Is, most of it, the questions that I got asked were, how is school going? And it was very easy for me to brush off with oh, everything's fine. But all the while, I was on academic probation.
Wow, seriously?
Oh, you have no idea. And I don't say that with a sense of pride, but it just kind of speaks to the lack of information and how easy it can be when parents aren't fully informed to really hold students accountable, because it took me on my word, which I appreciate and trusted. And if they listen to this eventually, they're going to give me a hard time.
Cesar, how dare you?
Exactly.
How dare you? Why'd you told us a story? No, I did it. I'm okay. That's funny.
I survived.
Yeah, you did.
but it did, and I'm not proud of it, but it was something that the environment was part of it, and the other was just the transitioning, and it wasn't out like I was out partying and socializing, all those things, but it was just something where I was again focused, and it took me a while to kind of get back into it in that way.
But that's honest, and while not proud of the challenge that you had, it's real. It's very transparent of you. So thank you for sharing that, because there may be a young man much like yourself who just needed to hear it and who's going through it now and can be inspired by it, because I think our truth is what helps other people to figure out that they can move on, to know that they can move on and get through some of what they have going on in their lives. So thank you for that, because that's a lot to say, to put that out there about yourself. Because on the flip side, you're now working on a doctorate.
Yes.
So something happened, right? Something went well. You figured something out that you continue to aspire for more. Something changed. So that's hope. I mean, that's what I really love about the story. And let me say this. I am so fascinated by the fact that all four of you went to school. Kudos to each of you for figuring that thing out. But then for three of you to be in education. So how ironic to come here for education, as a way for a better life. And then for you all to end up in education. That's pretty cool. Education changed lives. And it seems even apparent that the work of the people who helped you along the way, professors and staff, may have done something to you for you to even want to be in those environments, which is really cool. But I mean, even saying that, what was it that made you go ahead and move forward in working in higher education? Because you've been in it for 15 years at least?
At least, yes. So I graduated in 2002. And since then, I worked for a couple of nonprofits in between, but it's primarily been working at higher ed institutions. And oddly enough, I ended up working for the university that I graduated from for about 12 years. So majority of my professional experience has been at that institution. So I think it was a driving force in me really being passionate about working with the population that I did. I started off with a TRIO program, Educational Talent Search, which was at the time the first time that the university had received that program when I first started. So I was part of the team to be able to create that infrastructure and do outreach in the local community for junior high and high school students and promote higher ed. And then eventually I moved on to, once I finished my master's, to a position as director of another TRIO program, Student Support Services, working with Cal Poly students on campus. And I think that's really what solidified my work for this population and that particular age group, if you will. I enjoyed working with junior high and high school students, but having that relationship with adults, and they're really on the cusp of achieving, their lifelong dream of getting a higher education. To me, it felt more of a calling to be at that point. So I'm glad that I was able to focus that. But I think to your earlier point, I always knew that I wanted to be education, but taking a step back, I think part of it had to do with my parents, and I think a lot of first-gen parents, there's limited information that they have as far as career options. You have your traditional doctor, teacher, lawyer, police, whatever. So I think that was part of it, right? Where, okay, this is kind of a lane that you might want to go into because, education is a great path. It's a steady job, right? Which, that can be debatable depending on what aspect of education you work in. But I think that was part of it. But I think once I got into it, I originally wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a history teacher, which is why I'm undergraduate in history. And then once I saw my older sister actually be a teacher, I saw the additional work that I never saw as a student that teachers do, right?
I'm not doing that.
It's a better, efficient way for me to make a difference in students. So I wanted to be a counselor, right? And I think my first job as an outreach counselor, right, with junior high and high school students gave me a little bit of that. But also being in high schools and district offices, it really kind of opened up my eyes to the administrative side of it, where that's really what drives decisions. And then once I transitioned over to the director of that program, Student Support Services, as an administrator, it really gave me that opportunity to enforce, not necessarily enforce, but create, along with my team, a vision of how to support students. And I oversaw that program for almost 10 years. And, I was blessed to have, great dedicated people along the way, both from student assistants, graduate assistants, the staff that was there as well. And obviously it wasn't a perfect situation, a perfect setting, but keeping the ultimate goal in mind of how can we best serve our students. And I think, year after year, the program improved, and we were to provide a better experience each and every year as we made those improvements. So yeah, I think that's something that has kind of had a common thread of education and how to support students, which wanted me to kind of keep going and be part of it even more. So the positions that I've moved on since then have always been, in education, some kind of administrative niche to it. And even the position that I'm just recently transitioned over to, it gives me that possibility to be able to shape the student experience from an advising standpoint. So I'm right now a senior academic advisor at a small private college in Pasadena, where they're looking to kind of restructure the advising experience, for their students. So there's a lot of potential for growth and creation of different initiatives and programming, which I'm very excited about, because again, I can work with my team and other individuals on campus to be able to shape that student experience.
I love that you have been able to find your thing and that you've had success, that even you being in a career for as long as you were, that's something that is promising, especially for those of us who are first generation and are doubting our professional paths. You are an example that we can find our fit and find our thing and succeed in that. So thank you for that reminder. And then to you for working in TRIO programs, hats off to you, friend. Because I know that is hard work and it requires a lot of energy and patience and creativity, and to be giving back, like you said, to the very individuals who were once, where you were, or who are once where you were. It's really amazing to me. And I know outside of education, you have some other really cool projects going on. And there's one in particular that I want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and I don't know why, it just like the fly socks. And I'm like, oh, fly, FLI, because that, and I'm like, I think I supposed to have gotten that, but tell us about fly socks, because I have been so fascinated with it, since our first conversation. But yeah, it is first gen low income. Like, I don't know why I just, that is so funny that I just like, yeah, okay, all right. But yeah, tell us about that.
Well, I'm glad that you're able to get the right pronunciation. One of my friends who's not in education, he's in architecture. He's like, hey, what's up with these flea socks? I'm like, flea? No, it's fly.
Flea socks.
Flea socks. So I've been playing around with this idea for a while now, and hearing about other companies that have other social causes attached to them, started thinking like, well, what is it, something that I can do to be able to do that? And what I was seeing around there's a lot of philanthropic efforts, certainly by individuals and foundations, and that support education, and it's amazing, right? The more support that we can provide, the better. But as far as with some of these companies and other corporations, a lot of the support was going outside of the U.S. If you buy certain shoes, they give shoes to a kid somewhere in a different country, or donate water somewhere else, just different initiatives. And that's great. Anytime that we can improve somebody else's lives in a different way, I'm all for that. But being in education, I wanted to do something a little bit different. And a few years ago, I think it was right around the time that I moved to LA, started to kind of spice up my wardrobe a little bit. With men, there's very few ways that we can accessorize, and some gentlemen out there will debate, on that, absolutely. But there's very few things that we can do. So one of the things I started doing was wearing these kind of, funky socks, right? Different colors and patterns and things like that. So along with that, I started reading about these companies with social causes and reading about other ones as well that have special passion projects on the side. So I figured, well, I'm going to buy these anyway. Why not? What if other people are into this as well? And, looking at the trends, people are, if you look at the industry. But if I can create something that would support, first generation low income students, why not do that? So after thinking about it for a while, I decided with the name being very intentional and not shy And that's the reason why I kind of wanted to people to really own that identity and not be shy, about their first generation identity. I figured, there was another acronym, FGLI, which is also very common in higher ed for first gen low income. And there's this FLI acronym as well. So, thinking about using that word in different contexts and different meanings, there's the slang for it as well. So I'm like, okay, well, fly socks sounds like a, great thing. I want it to be something that's fashionable, that's, comfortable as well. And for people to wear and be proud and really kind of own that identity. So over the last year or so, I started making more progress. And early this year, I decided to kind of really jump into the deep end and go for it. So I established an LLC called Stuff with a Purpose. It's the name of the company. And as part of that is this concept of fly socks. So my inaugural design, as you've seen, it's a very basic design, which is a solid background, and it has little graduation caps, all throughout. So from afar, they kind of look like diamonds or polka dots. But when you get a closer look, you actually see that they're graduation caps. So the first 5 colors or 5 designs that I have, 4 of the 5 are for school colors that I've gone to between elementary school and graduate school. So I want to kind of put that personal touch. And I debuted the idea at a conference in mid-June out in Orlando through the NASPA Association, and received tremendous support and wonderful feedback. And a lot of people were excited by it. So now from that, a lot of institutions now expressed interest in customizing that design in their own schools' color schemes, which is great. And it wasn't something that originally, again, being a first-time entrepreneur, that I was thinking of different aspects, because I was more focused on growing the brand and having different mainstream styles, if you will, and just using this as kind of launching pad to be able to kind of grow the business. But now it's given me a different avenue to a different population to be able to have this particular design, work with universities in this way, and still, with the goal to still grow the company and have more traditional designs and more modern and sophisticated designs beyond just graduation caps. So it's been a great response. I just recently had my first bulk order placed through the University of Pennsylvania, to shout out to them and their support. And I have a few other ones in the pipeline. But the mission of this is to use profits, after production costs and overhead and all those different things, but to use everything else to establish the scholarship. So my goal is to have this out as early as next spring. And I'm already working with a scholarship administrator to be able to do that. Well, they'll create the application, do the recruiting and the screening and selection, and all I'm giving them is obviously the funds, but also the criteria, for that. And it's going to be, students have to be first generation, low income, and also knowing that students who are DACA recipients have limited resources, financial resources. I also want to make it available to them. So that's kind of the direction that, Fly Socks is going. I'm still growing and as a first-time business owner, I'm growing as well in that sense. I'm learning everything from website development to just business lingo and financial planning, for businesses and all those different things. So I'm definitely learning and growing in that aspect, and appreciate all the advice that I've been given up until now from some of the consultants I'm working with, friends who've been in the industries for quite a while, and just, random business owners that I've had conversations with, especially, mom and pop shops, and kind of what drives them and kind of any advice that I can glean for them. So it's been a great amount of support that I've gotten over the last few months as this kind of gets off the ground a little bit more.
Man, round of applause to you. This is just so cool. I'm always fascinated. And this is one of the coolest efforts that I've heard of, especially coming from a first-gen low-income individual, from a man of color, to do all of these things. So to just really pull yourself up and get out there and just say, I'm going to do this, and to have that confidence, and then to think that you've already placed your first bulk order with a major institution. Just keep going. That's just what it is, because entrepreneurship, I'm sure, is still a very interesting space to navigate, or has been an interesting space to navigate. And I speak on that from the first gen low income perspective as well. And having a business similar to yours, that a certain percentage of my profits goes back into our community as well, in the form of scholarships or grants for hardship. So to know that this was so intentional and so purposeful, really one of those very exciting things, because social entrepreneurship is on the rise. And it's important for us to not just be about the money
and to be about purpose, and that you've done this is very innovative. And the socks, like, who'd have thought? I mean, you did, of course. I mean, you're a man, because for me, I just like to buy my husband socks because I like for him to look fly.
There you go.
See, I didn't even think about it until I did it just now. So that's, very between that and neckties, and then for you to say, let's do socks instead, because socks are style. I'm the kind of woman that I look at a man's socks, especially when he's dressed, because I'm like, where's your flavor? So that you did that is really, really cool, Cesar. It's really, really cool. So shout out to you for that. So just curious, just where you are now, because you have your business going, you transition into, your position where you are now. You've started a doctoral program. What else is next for you? What's coming up? What are you hoping for the next, 5 to 10 years to come?
Well, I think, keep growing the business, for one, and then finding other opportunities where I can be of service to others, whether that's in different positions eventually, or through collaborating with other individuals or organizations. I want to keep going in this direction. I think it's definitely been a calling and a blessing to be able to get to this point, and certainly having challenges along the way. But I think, like you said earlier, it's important to share our story. And that's what I want to encourage other individuals to do. And I definitely applaud your efforts for having this platform for other individuals to have that.
Wow.
Because, as you mentioned earlier, when I shared my story about being on academic probation, right, there's somebody out there that might strike a chord,
yes,
and they're going to go out there and get help, which is something I didn't do initially, right? So I think the more that we are able to share our stories, show not just our humanity, but certainly our vulnerability, and show that, you can go through these challenges and have these obstacles in front of you, and you can still overcome them, and a lot of the times, one of the things that I've learned over my lifetime is that it's certainly okay to ask for help. And more often than not, I have been. It took me a while to really realize that and open up and accept help. And I think that's one of the blessings I've had, is that I've always had supportive individuals, whether it was family, friends, professors, teachers, counselors, whoever, that were there, that when I was ready to accept their help and their support, they were there. So I think continuing in that route for other individuals, it's something that I definitely want to continue to have.
I want to touch on something you just said. I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting. You said when you were ready to accept their help. What did that look like for you? Because there are still people who just, I can do this by myself. Let me do this by myself. How did you come to that?
Well, I think it's for me was the realization that help can come from any place. And those individuals can look many different ways. And, having grown up with this image of, people that are going to help me are going to look like me. And my experience thus far is that some of the times, in my case, a lot of the times, individuals that helped me didn't always look like me. So being open to that and trusting that. And if I may, after my undergrad career, and I waited about 3.5 years before going back to grad school, or before starting a master's program. And part of the reason I waited was because my undergrad career was not very stellar. And, I knew that I was far below the requirements to a graduate program. So to kind of, get my feet wet, I approached an administrator at my university that was overseeing the counseling program, Latino male, and overseeing the program at the time. And I said, look, I'd like to take one class to test it out. The university had this open enrollment policy where you can take a certain amount of classes and not go through the regular application process. People that wanted professional development and things of that nature, right? So I knew there was a policy for it. So I went to this individual saying, look, I want to see to prove to myself that I can do this work. And he said no. And I was very surprised. I'm like, there's a policy, you have space. And a lot of in the back of my mind had to do with, he was also a Mexican-American male. And it was kind of naive on me. And it was kind of a wake-up call that, people that look like you are not always going to help you. So fast forward, 3 years later, I was doing the outreach work, right? And in my office, there was another young woman who had heard about this new program that the university was starting, a new master's program in educational administration. He's like, hey, they're going to have an informational session later today. If you're interested, you should come. This young lady was white and, wonderful person. And we had a friendship. So I'm like, okay, I'll show up. So I did. And similar to my undergrad career, I was only one of a very few persons of color in that informational meeting. So the two program chairs, presented about the program and got me excited about it. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, you don't have the best academic record to get in here. And this older gentleman, white male, after the session, I approached him. He was one of the chairs of the program, and I was very honest. And I'm like, you know what? This is my academic record. I don't think, I meet your criteria, based on what you said. And to this day, I still kind of get choked up thinking about it. But he said, don't worry about it, just apply. Very simply. And I did. And I did apply. And, a few weeks later, after the deadline and everything for application, I got the letter that I was accepted into the program. And, that's how I started my master's program. That this one gentleman, this one committee decided to give me a chance to get open it. And being more focused, being a little bit older obviously helped along with that. But I think it was that willingness and realization that help can come from anywhere. So being open to that, I think in the long run can help us avoid some of the challenges and strugglers that we might be in, right? If we're willing to just be that more open. And I'm sure more individuals are. And some people might have learned that a lot earlier than I did, but that's part of kind of what laid the foundation for my future work. I went into that master's program, and it was a very intense program. It was an 11-month program. So there was 11 months I didn't have much of a social life. And it was quite a contrast from my undergraduate career in that I graduated with honors, which is, complete night and day from my undergrad experience. Straight A's, although I'm still a little bit bitter about this A- that I got in one class.
It's an A, though. It's an A. You got the A. Hey, you got it.
But no, I think it's, again, going back to realization that I just kind of being open to those things. And I had to learn it in a different way and a little bit disappointed, right? But moving forward, and I think a lot of the advice, like you said earlier, something that you're given is just keep going. Keep going and be persistent. And I think as first gen, that's kind of something that you're sort of anointed with, for better or worse, because you have to get through, you have to figure out the system on your own at the beginning, if no one's there to help you, if you don't know where to get help, and just kind of having that mentality. And now, both you and I as entrepreneurs, it still kind of feels funny to me to say that, right?
Yeah.
But you figure it out as you go, right? And you get help and you reach out for resources and you recognize where your limitations might be and being open to accepting help from others. The reason I found out about your podcast was through a friend of mine who I just met about a year ago. And she's been a great support. I call her Miss Blossom. So if she's listening, her name is Maricela Herrera. Works at Arizona State University. She's been a great friend, great mentor, great coach. But again, she was very encouraging in my, idea for FLI socks, been very supportive and has been able to kind of provide that ongoing support, that a lot of other friends and family as well are providing. So again, just accepting that help from different sources.
Thank you for that. I don't know if I've ever really said this before. That's kind of skimming my brain like that. Have I said this? I had a really awesome mentor, Professor Dean, when I was an undergrad, who encouraged me to go to graduate school and who encouraged me to reach for the stars and was always very supportive. But it wasn't until my master's program that other lights started to come on. But there was a teacher, not a teacher, professor, actually, an older white lady who at the time was living in Mississippi because we were in Mississippi. And she walked up to me one day in class and she said to me, I think you should apply for a doctorate. And I looked at her, what do you mean? She's like, I really think you should apply for a doctorate. And she didn't say it loud to make it obvious. She just tapped me on the shoulder and she said it. And I looked at her and I was like, huh? She's like, yeah, come by my office if you want to talk. And she'll never know how much that moment changed my life. So, and I give her credit for tapping me on the shoulder. I don't think it's that I may have never gone because I did have people telling me to go, but she pushed me to do it and then stayed with me through that process. And my mentor from undergrad actually was really, instrumental in helping me get everything squared away and writing your recommendation and, reading over papers for me. But it's interesting that, you, like I said, you accept help, but also to not be resistant to the fact that there are other people who may not look like you who are willing to help you on this journey. Thank you for that reminder and for saying that, because like yourself, I've had many times where maybe I assumed because we look alike, right? You're supposed to, we here to help each other, hold me down. And it's like, what? You just like everybody else kind of. So that's powerful that we don't get caught up in that mindset and then we keep ourselves open. So again, similar to her, I'm like, man, we're so much alike. We have so much in common. But that is, thank you for that, especially for those who are resistant or thinking that other people just want to see people of color down. No, that's not true. There are a lot of people who they just see people and they see good people and they see people with potential and they want to help them do better. That's what I believe. That's really cool. So we are at a point where we are having to wrap up. I really like talking to you. You're so thoughtful and so reflective and, just so honest, about what you've experienced, and you share what you've learned, which is equally important and helpful in this space. So just as we're departing, my good friend, what would you want to leave us with? What thoughts to carry with us for the rest of our lives?
I think as a first-gen individual, I think that's something I want to encourage others to do, to kind of flaunt their flyness, if you will.
Okay.
To talk about it, to be a mentor, to be a role model to others, and just kind of share that story, because you never know who's waiting to, kind of raise their hand as well and say, I'm also first gen.
Yes.
And realizing, that there are thousands of first gen professionals now, in the workforce, some just out of undergrad or graduate school, others in the field for decades, right? So there's definitely a lot of great experience to be gleaned for that. And I think that that's a common ground that we can find to be able to open up to other individuals. But I think is just continuing to kind of share our stories. And we never know who's listening, and never who's looking up to us, that we might be able to help and inspire a little bit more. So own that first-gen identity, continue to flaunt your flyness, and, keep going.
Absolutely, Cesar. Well, thank you so much, friend, for being here, for reaching out, for just all of the empowerment today and the enlightenment that you've brought. Thank you for that. Where on the internet can those who want to reach out to you find you?
Well, my website is up. It's a landing page right now because, like I said, I'm learning to be a web developer as well. So flysocks.com. It's a landing page right now, but you can enter your email, and once the online store opens, then I'll reach out to those on the email list. Social media, I do have a Facebook, which is also FlySocks, at the end, facebook.com/FlySocks, and Instagram at FlySocks as well. So all the social media handles that I have, handles are all FlySocks, but Twitter is not active yet, but it will be.
Awesome. Well, again, Cesar, thank you so much for your time today, for just sharing. Thank you for being here. Wishing you nothing but the best in everything that lies ahead of you. And, just know that we in the First Gen Lounge, we're cheering for you and we've got your back.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, gosh, you're so very welcome. Did you go, at any point during this session? If so, then go ahead and subscribe, then uplift friends, colleagues, and students by sharing the show. Also, don't miss out on exclusive insights that I only share via email by joining the First Gen family at www.thepurposeprofessor.com/family. I know I said a whole lot, so I'm going to drop a link in the show notes. Now, until the next time, don't forget to be resilient, authentic, and intentional in all that you do. And no matter what, keep pressing forward.